Thatcher was a kind of early version of Trump. The law didn't count. All that counted was power and money. But go back to the Boris Johnson appointed the chair of the BBC. I can't remember, it's Sharp. And there was a big fuss about the £800,000 loan that Sharp arranged for Johnson. The rest of the story didn't emerge. Johnson offered Sharp a peerage to continue to attack the BBC and undermine it. And that was the deal. Johnson got in line, as Thatcher had before her with Mackenzie, and offered Sharp a peerage if he'd carry on attacking the BBC and subverting it from inside. I mean, this is serious stuff. But the refusal of the Metropolitan Police to investigate anything is another crime.
Well, it's perversion of the course of justice. You're quite right. I mean, that seems to be what's going on here. Very, very serious crimes at the top of the Metropolitan Police.
Tony, do you remember when Murdoch closed the News of the World? There was actually no statement from Murdoch. There were mumblings in the media that he had done it because he was so ashamed of what the News of the World had done. That wasn't what happened. Stuart Kuttner was deleting and suppressing all the emails, 30 million of them. And he told Murdoch he couldn't finish it, he couldn't do it. There were too many emails to suppress them all, because the emails were between the whip's offices in Parliament, MI5, the special branch, possibly MI6 as well. So in 2011, the suppression man told Murdoch it couldn't be done, and Murdoch closed the paper to stop the investigation. That was the most massive perversion of the course of justice in modern British history. Murdoch closed the News of the World to prevent evidence reaching the Met. Not that getting evidence to the Met meant anything, because nothing happened.
The first thing I need to say is I need to make it loud and clear that people like me come in the wake of a host of campaigns of people who don't think democracy is dead, who don't think justice is dead, who don't accept injustice. And for me, Steve Dorrell's book Smear about the treatment of Harold Wilson is one of the most disturbing and inspirational books I've read in many years. Furthermore, it goes along with another book that I find disturbing and inspirational, Empire of Secrets by Calder Walton. Along with these inspirations of people who research things, I would place very, very highly Eileen and Mark Turnbull's work, their persistence in digging and digging and digging and not giving up. But also, let's patch in all the other campaigns: Orgreave, Hillsborough, Shrewsbury, the Scots miners who have now got their charges quashed. What about Grenfell Tower? What about Hillsborough? What about the Lawrence family? What about Duane Brooks? What about Windrush? What about all the campaigns I don't know about? We are actually in the middle of a failing state, a state that is extremely well developed at covering things up. It likes to cover things up. It likes to delay and deny until you die. And of course, Des Warren did die. He was left hanging, imprisoned, perturbed, drugged. And these are deeply, deeply shocking things, which are all indicative not only of an ailing state, but an imperial state that is dying, that has spent a lot of time dying, a lot of time covering things up. And one of the campaigns I would like to mention is the campaign of the Mau Mau victims in Kenya, or Kenya. I don't even know how to pronounce it properly. But these people uncovered the fact that there were 1,500 files hidden away in a place called Hanslope Park in Milton Keynes. I hope that's the right pronunciation of Keynes or Keynes. I don't know, but it'll have to do. So what we have here is an entire building, a vast building, not a garden shed, but a vast building where thousands and thousands of files about what Britain did in its imperial past that have been secreted away and are still secreted away. And until there is a proper openness about all this, we will carry on having scandal after scandal, after scandal after scandal. How appalling is the Windrush scandal? How appalling is the Grenfell Tower scandal? How appalling is it that anybody who campaigns about anything is deemed a subversive? And before I turn to what small things I have to say about my own experience of trying to cover some of these stories, I'd just like to say that this period from 1970 or 1968 onwards is the period where military-industrial complex capitalism and its scientific allies are busy polluting the planet as never before, subverting the very possibilities of human life, and all the special branch and the police can do is chase after a load of wee campaigners fighting for £1 an hour in the 1972 building workers' strike. I was arrested as a reporter watching what went on in Birmingham during that strike. I was found not guilty eventually after a few months of torment. Nothing like all the pickets have experienced, 40-odd years of torment. This is how terrible this is. This is how tyrannical bits of lawlessness are woven into the so-called democratic state, which is very, very far from democratic in all sorts of ways. I first came across people watching me and others when I was a young cub reporter at Construction News in 1969 and 1970, when we first came across the McAlpines' tremendous ability to get contracts, even though they weren't the lowest bidders, because they were so closely aligned with the military-industrial complex and the British state. They were able to get the contract to build BSC, British Steel Corporation's Anchor Steelworks, even though they were far from the lowest bidder. They were able to get all sorts of other contracts. And they were also able to be among the people who trampled on the building workers in the 1972 strike and who arranged for horrible things to happen, not in Liverpool, not in Birmingham, but in North Wales, where the trade union and labour movement was very weak. And there's no doubt whatsoever that this was a strategic decision taken to victimise people, to put people on trial who should never have been put on trial. Indeed, the local police forces had concluded that there was trouble on both sides and the cases should not go ahead. But we're dealing with 1968, the great demonstrations against the Vietnam War. And some people, demented people, and people who really hanker after a past that is long gone, a past that involved making money from slavery, making money from gold mines in southern Africa, making money from Rhodesia where the land was stolen by Rhodes and his friends from the African people, making money in the Democratic Republic of Congo, or the Congo as it used to be called. You're dealing with people who really believe that what they had in that period was the ultimate summa of civilization. Now, actually, it was racist, it was exploitative, it was unpleasant and horrible. But for them, it brought them land, it brought them money, it brought them treasures, some of which they stole, including the treasures from the Parthenon. And it's in that milieu that one must locate the arrival of the Thatcher government and its profoundly reactionary and horrible behaviour. So what happened to the steel workers and then the miners and then the workers at Wapping were not unconnected. They were not random accidents. In each of these disputes, in almost every form of radical protest in Britain, you have the police, the special police, the secret police, and their allies at work. What happened to me, we were spied on at Construction News in 1969 and 1970, and the editor of the little paper I worked for, one of the most profitable papers in British history, Construction News, was got rid of because he would not stop publishing difficult stories about the realities of the construction industry. So, after that, I worked for the Socialist Worker for a while, for a good while. And there I was able to expose the fact that the Vesti company had secretly contrived to cheat the dock workers out of their jobs and create a new company, Midland Cold Storage, where they were then arrested for picketing and put in jail. And I was able to show that they had fiddled all this and lied to the company registrars, had done this all through front companies, the usual repertoire of dishonesty that you get among major polluters and exploiters. Sometime after that, I had to leave the Socialist Worker because I didn't fancy being bossed around by somebody who seemed to think that toy Bolshevism was de rigueur and that it was a really good idea to boss people around. And I was lucky enough to go and work for World in Action for a while, for quite a long while. And there again, there were strange events. There were people who were put into the program who were dubious, dodgy, who were undermining things, causing fights and arguments. And it's my experience that eventually I left there and I went to work at The Guardian. And once again, strange events took place. We were investigating the background to the shameful murder of Stephen Lawrence, the role of corruption in that, the levels of corruption in the Metropolitan Police. And all of this was being covered up. And in order to prevent publication, the Commander Andy Hayman, one of the most disreputable senior officials of the Met, interfered behind the scenes and basically had us moved off the story. So what you have when you look into what happened in Britain in my lifetime, in our lifetime, is that Rupert Murdoch became the kingpin of the communications business. And he personally and his allies corrupted the Metropolitan Police and turned them into their own peons. He was even in a position where they were coaching the candidates for the commissioner. And the commissioner took his shillings. And out of the Wapping tragedy grew a closeness between Murdoch and the police and the British establishment that still, to a reduced degree after the hacking scandal, continues to this day. But we can be quite clear, Sky TV, if you had Sky TV, then Sky TV would be installing the bugs on behalf of the special branch. If you wanted to argue for proper wages and conditions for people who worked in the health services or worked as delivery drivers, you would be shat on by the Murdoch press. This was a disgraceful alliance. And this story, a huge story of how corrupt the relationship between the secret state, the official state, the Tory party. This is why there was no Levison II, because there's a continual running line from 1968 onwards, from the great anti-Vietnam War demonstrations, that anybody who protests about almost anything is viewed as either a subversive or potentially subversive. And this is a disgraceful state of affairs. And its origins lie absolutely in Britain's imperial adventures and corruption in Ireland, in India, in the West Indies, in Southern Africa. And this cancer that is in our midst is something that right now they are trying to defend against those honourable people in the museums and in the universities who want to come to terms with Britain's imperial past. Mm-hmm. And until we do come to terms with that, we can be damn sure there'll be many, many more scandals of this kind, many more campaigns who are treated for years with procrastination, with denial of information. And this is just the British way. I'm sorry, and until we acknowledge this, until we build much, much bigger, freer, more generous alliances, this will be the continuing decline and decline and decline of a Britain that has never been modern, has never been really democratic, and is still run by an elite who don't want to be modern and don't want to be democratic.